Hi, everyone. My name is Gary Stewart, and I'm the founder and CEO of FounderTribes, a mobile app that provides founders across the world with access to the feedback, networks, and capital that they need to start up and scale up their businesses, all from their mobile phones. We exist to empower entrepreneurs of all races, genders, geographies, religions, sexual orientations, and all other such considerations that really should not be considered when you're making an investment decision. Because we understand that while talent is distributed equally, opportunity is not. And we are here to change that, which is why I'm so excited to welcome this panel with world-class angels and VCs that collectively have access to over $100 billion in funding. This is one of our most important panels because Black people only receive 1% of VC funding in the US, despite making up about 14% of the population. And in the UK, the numbers aren't much better, probably worse even. Black people only get about 0.24% of funding, despite being 4 to 5% of the population. And it's not only about who's getting funded, it's also about who's making the investment decisions. Until very recently, there were only 7 Black people in the top 100 US VC firms with any decision-making authority. And I suspect that the numbers are even more dire in the UK and Europe. This is why we are lucky to have this panel be moderated by the supremely educated and brilliant Fredua Akosa, who is a doctor turned VC with a master's in public health from Yale and an MBA from Oxford. But before I turn it over to Fredua, I'd like to give you a sneak peek of our FounderTribes app, which we've just launched this week, so you can already find it on the app stores.
We live in a world where more than 500 million entrepreneurs will never get access to the feedback, networks, and capital they may need to realize their dreams. Talent is distributed evenly, but opportunity isn't. FounderTribes exists to change that. Our mobile app can be accessed by anyone, anywhere in the world. It all begins with a founder submitting a pitch that will be evaluated by a community of entrepreneurs and investors relevant to their vertical and stage. Through the app, each founder gets qualified feedback about which areas of their business might need improvement, in the form of how many people swiped right or left, and in the form of ratings on each key element of a business plan based on Sequoia Capital's evaluation system. Each founder is then offered a personalized selection of video tips from world-class founders who explain how they've overcome similar challenges. Our professors are truly world-class and include such names as Stacey Abrams, Steve Blank, Jen Wong, and Anne Wojcicki. If a founder wants more support, she can access our curated database of coaches and mentors and set up one-to-ones, all via the app. Each founder iterates her pitch until the community of entrepreneurs and investors say that she is investment worthy. We'll then introduce her to relevant funders appropriate to her stage and vertical, including venture capital, angels, and alternative finance. We already have paying customers, including Capital Enterprise. And our investors include American unicorn founders such as Sander Daniels, founder of Thumbtack, which has raised $436 million from Sequoia Capital and Google, Zach Bookman, founder of OpenGov, who has raised $140 million from investors including Andreessen Horowitz, executives like Jamie Broderick, who is the former head of wealth management at UBS UK and Jersey, and Dana Wagner, who is currently the chief legal officer at Impossible Foods, which has raised $1.4 billion from investors like Serena Williams, Katy Perry, and Jay-Z. We are leveling the playing field for entrepreneurial talent. So download the app, accelerate your business, and empower yourself.
And now I'm as excited as you guys are to hear from the panel. So I'll ask Fredua to introduce our amazing panel of speakers who will answer the question, are investors really feeling the heat to diversify, or will 2021 end with the same depressing statistics that I mentioned a little while earlier? Thanks very much.
Thanks, Gary. It's great to be on. So I'd like to introduce the panel for today. We have Dami Osunsanya. She's the head of SoftBank's Emerge Accelerator and head of Value Creation and SoftBank's Opportunity Fund. We also have Chris Totman, the general partner at Notion Capital. Igosa Omugui, a managing partner at Echo VC. Paul Murphy, partner at Northzone. Rustin Brown, angel investor and partner at Kirkland and Ellis LLP. Jamie Broderick, angel investor and board member at Impact Investing Institution. And Jean DeForgalis, managing partner and founder at Ascension Ventures. It's great to have you all on.
Good to be here.
Thank you to have us.
So I'm going to kind of jump in to the question that, or what Gary expressed a bit earlier when he mentioned that Black founders only get 0.24% of funds in the UK and less than 1% in the UK. So I'd love to start off with Dami. Why do you think that is? And why do you think Black women are affected more disproportionately than any other group in terms of raising venture capital?
Sure. So I think if we take a step back, venture capital is a lot about networks and circles and a lot of signals for us to pick the best deals. And oftentimes it's really confusing. There's, a funnel of thousands and thousands of companies. As people, we're just naturally biased towards people who go to the same schools, have the same background, and especially have the same upbringing as us. So I think that these natural biases that have no fault of anyone's own, are not intentional, actually create these elite circles that Black individuals are not included in. So as a result, when you're having these investing conversations, when people don't look like you, don't have the same background, you're less likely to see that big vision that they have and then put your capital behind it. So, what I'm proud of at SoftBank is through the Opportunity Fund, which has committed $100 million for Black and Latinx founders in the US, and through our Emerge Accelerator for underrepresented founders, we're putting that on its head and saying, let's actually look at only diverse individuals who we know will have amazing companies, and let's go ahead and put that capital in a very intentional way. So I think that there's no pipeline issue. It's definitely an opportunity for us to be really intentional on making sure that these individuals get access to the capital.
Right. Chris, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I think when Dami talks about stepping back, I think she's absolutely right. Because I think if you look at the history, then it's, how was venture capital created? I've actually got the book on next to my desk, right back to just after the Second World War. And then how did that capital move around? How did it flow? And it was a lot to do with who you knew and where you were and the networks that you went to and schools that you were in, the technologies that you worked on, and it was born through there. And so I think, a lot of it is extremely structural. And I think the frustrating thing about, Gary's final comment is the fact of, where will we get to by the end of the year, or what will we be talking about in a year's time? And I think when it's very, very structural, then it's very hard to unwind that sort of the aggregated data, and so I think, there is a huge and significant effort that's required in order to completely shift the paradigm. And so I think that those structural challenges, need to be, met, head on, really, in order to change the way that the industry is, made up and the way that it operates. And, you get to a point where, how does any company or industry reflect the society that it operates within? And that is ultimately the big challenge for our industry and many other industries too.
Great. Agosa, do you have any additional thoughts on how you think and why you think that Black founders in particular get invested in less than any other groups, and what you feel can be done as we try to change that narrative?
Yeah, so I think, having done this VC thing for a little while, I think Dami's right in the sense that it always ends up being Black founders not being inside the circle. And the circle, once you get into the circle, you kind of realize very quickly what the rules are and things work, and the scratch my back, you scratch your back, and you mark me up and all that good stuff. And Black founders they're just not really participants inside the circle. The other challenge is that because they're not, and pattern matching is a very important and integral part of how VC works, what you then do is, as a Black founder, since you don't know the rules, when you come in, no one is sort of giving you guidance. And so you come in thinking that you're going to do reasonable things, and and no one tells you this is how you pitch. I've talked about some of the limitations Black founders come in with, and they seem so trivial, but yet they matter. I've talked about things like you come into a meeting and you have a deck, and the truth of the matter is that these folks are not going to necessarily rate you, and so you want to put a bunch of information there so that you can get to zero because you're negative coming into the meeting. So you start overcompensating to get to zero just so people can take you seriously, and then people are like, "Oh, that's a lot of information," and are they hiding something, right? And you go out and someone says, you could have done that in a much simpler way, and and you're like, well, I'm just trying to show my data. And I'm like, well, that's not how it works. It's it's not about showing your data. Like, in fact, showing your data makes people worried. And so those are the kinds of situations that occur that Black founders essentially are just walking around, with one leg, just really one-legged. The other thing I think that occurs is really an aperture issue. And from the investor's perspective, right, a lot of them have sort of figured out that, I can sort of keep my aperture to this very specific focus, and it has worked in the past and I'm good, and never sort of realizing that there's so much more you can do. I was surprised. We just announced a deal, a Series B deal in a Black female founder, and it was an $85 million deal, which, is not huge. And I was surprised that it was the biggest Series B deal by Black female founder ever, like in the history of the world. And I'm thinking, with all due respect, I've pitched $450 million deals, so 85 is just a walk in the park. But apparently it was so structurally, it was a seismic event. And and then we can talk about that deal, because that deal also showed me a lot about how much further we have to go. But we'll have plenty of time to talk about it, because that deal, my eyes opened, and I've been in this business a long time, but my eyes did open. So, but those are some thoughts on that.
Thanks so much, guys. So we'll definitely want to explore that deal more in detail as we go on. Investing in startups is already so. In a world where 95% of VCs don't generate meaningful returns, without speaking of angels investing, there's a focus on diversity and unnecessary distraction or an opportunity. Paul.
For me, you're cheating a bit because we've talked about this at length, Fredwa, but I think it's absolutely not a distraction. I think it is an opportunity, and I say that genuinely, and I think we can be as capitalistic as we want to, and have that be the driver for getting more diverse founders. I think right now we're living in a world where everything, in the tech world at least, everything is changing. Every industry, from construction to food, is being upended. And why would you want to not see every opportunity out there? and really evaluate it, there are more opportunities than we can kind of take advantage of from an investor perspective. So I definitely don't think it's a distraction, but I also don't want to minimize the comments earlier that there are, some real challenges in, the industry. And I think both, evaluating companies, but probably more importantly, encouraging the right founders to meet the right investors along the way.
Jean, what are your thoughts on kind of whether this provides an opportunity, an untapped opportunity, or are we being distracted and should focus more on investment opportunities as they exist?
No, I definitely think it provides an opportunity, and at Ascension we run quite a few very thesis-driven funds in the impact space. So one's around tackling childhood obesity, and the other one around reducing poverty. And I think because we've got very tight theses, we need to kind of look everywhere for deal flow. So it just really forces us to open up to new founders, and I kind of believe that the next 10 years is really going to be the decade of purpose, and a lot of female founders or BAME founders are kind of often more purpose driven. So I think the opportunity to back those founders that are trying to solve the world's biggest problems is there, and that's what we're seeing. So I think that kind of link to finding founders that are kind of thinking outside of the box will lead us, and has led us to those founders. So our statistics, just very quickly, I mean, we've invested in 115 unique companies since 2015. And I would say 20% of those were female founders and 19% were BAME founders. But in 2019, female founders were 25% and BAME 20%. And in the last 13 months, we've had 26% with at least one female co-founder and 33% BAME. So I do think the spotlight on this issue in the industry has really kicked up a notch in the last couple of years with studies from people like the British Business Bank, Diversity VC, and panels like this, which really increases awareness of the problem and trying to find solutions. So I think talking about it is great, because there's this unconscious bias that you're not aware of until you start seeing the stats and you try and do something about it.
And Jamie, you've been in the world of impact investing for so long, and as an angel investor, where do you stand on this? And do you think that the opportunity to invest in diverse founders provides an untapped opportunity, or do you feel that we should be focused more on the opportunities as they stand, without really emphasizing that aspect of it?
No, I think that investors are supposed to be really interested in overlooked sectors, and this is an overlooked sector. So I would say this qualifies as an opportunity. And I think in addition, you get underrepresented founders often serve underrepresented sectors of society, which are poorly understood by mainstream ventures. So this is an opportunity. So I think if venture capital favors people with good access isn't really a predictor of good business execution. So what's happening is that capital is being allocated inefficiently. That should be an opportunity. So there's no question to me that this is an opportunity, and we shouldn't sublimate the diversity issue. We should pay attention to it.
Brilliant. So we've kind of talked about how venture capital works through a system of relationships and warm introductions, and that typically helps VCs to vet promising founders and startups. But as we've pointed out, it can be quite exclusive in the way that it prevents women, people of color, LGBTQ plus, and non-formally educated people from accessing funding and developing successful and scalable businesses. How do you approach sourcing with this in mind, Rustin?
Yeah, for me, I think networks are important, because that's where you get the element of trust and reliability. So, all the founders that I've invested in have either come through friends of mine, and, for me, I just happen to be in diverse networks. I went to Georgetown University, which was a predominantly white institution, and I grew up in predominantly white neighborhoods all my life. But I also went to Howard University School of Law, which is one of the premier African-American HBCU, and particularly law school, where we focus on ideas of social engineering. And so my network is intentionally broad, so I get access to deals that people wouldn't get, even people on these calls wouldn't necessarily get. And that's been my greatest achievement is being able to understand both sides of it, being able to be in the room where I can talk to Jamie and Chris just as easily as I can talk to Damien and Agosta, because I've lived both of those experiences. And I think the more that we open up our networks and find people who have shared lived experiences, particularly minorities whose shared lived experiences include a lot of challenges. So, if capitalism is meant to solve problems, you might want to go to the people who've overcome problems, in the US for 400 years. Agreed.
So Paul, I'm interested in how because I work closely with you, and how have you been able to kind of unpack and approach sourcing in a way that opens access? I know you've used the internet in particular in a way that a lot of VCs typically don't do. I would love you to kind of unpack that a bit and share with us how you approach sourcing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I want to just be very honest about is, I reflected, last year and realized that there was a problem. There was a problem with my deal flow. There was a problem with the diversity of the companies that I had invested in, even though I'd only been doing this job for 3 years. As a founder, I prioritized, one of our KPIs was racial, ethnic, and gender diversity. We tracked it every month. I was religious about it. And then I got into this role, and I, for whatever reason, I just assumed that wasn't my problem. I was looking for great companies. And then 3 years in, I hadn't invested in a non-white male founder team. That's crazy. I mean, I haven't done that many investments, but that's still crazy. So when, I deconstructed that, and, I realized that the common feedback is access. How do we get access? It's warm intros, it's warm networks, which I thought, I didn't go to an Ivy League school. So, my the doors were open much more for me than they were for others, but they weren't fully open for me either when I was a founder. And I found that frustrating. So I thought, well, let's just open it up fully. No more warm intros. My email address is out there. It's public. I've processed as much as I could, had the team's help as well. And now, we'll take a meeting with anyone that contacts us. And if it's clearly not a fit, we'll not only tell them it's not a fit, but we'll try to point people in the right direction. And that's led me from, I've only done 7 investments. That's led me from, no kind of non-white male founding teams to having done 2 in the last 4 months. So I feel, to Gary's question at the beginning, it's better. It's not where it needs to be, but it's getting better. And these are awesome companies. So I'm really excited about that too.
Brilliant. Dami, you're currently tasked with the huge responsibility of heading value creation at SoftBank's Opportunity Fund. We'd love to know how you're approaching sourcing with all these stats in mind.
Sure. And I'd love to take your other question about, do we think it's an opportunity or, is it a distraction? Because we're called the SoftBank Opportunity Fund, focused on Black and Latinx founders. And I think we think of the opportunity in both ways. One is obviously giving founders the opportunity to meet amazing investors like you all on the call. But the other side, SoftBank likes looking for underserved markets. So we have a LATAM fund we just launched. I'm sure you guys just heard about the Miami initiative. Only 1% of all, I see your eye stroke, Mahal. Only 1% of all investing goes to Miami today, and we're excited about that as well. So our approach in general is this is an opportunity to get outsized returns, and it's our only early stage vehicle. So between the Opportunity Fund, in which I lead value creation, and then the Emerge Accelerator, in which I just led 14 investments in, and we're going to the UK soon to launch as well. we really believe our way of getting outsized returns on the early stage is through underrepresented founders. So we certainly look at it from that way. And then to answer your question a little bit more directly, so sourcing for us, we knew that soft intros has actually been the biggest barrier. We talk about these circles, we talk about the fact that, it's who you know, who connects you to who knows the investor. So we've opened up applications, and you can literally go on the website and you put in your applications. We've looked at over 800 deals through the Opportunity Fund and 300 deals through the Emerge Accelerator. And we look at every application and we take every call with the founders. And we found that we've seen more unique deal flow and found founders and invested in founders that we ordinarily would not have had access to. So I think to Paul's point earlier about having those coffee chats or having those conversations with individuals and then looking through applications you ordinarily wouldn't have is really unique and important in getting that deal flow. But our funnel is all diverse, so it also helps from that aspect.
Great. So, I mean, I guess the question would be, are sourcing strategies to diversify the founding teams we interact with enough? Are the deeper requirements at play here? We've heard investors from Serena Williams to Melinda Gates talk about the often touted talent pipeline problem that lots of VCs mention as the problem is inaccurate. And we have a network selectivity and resource allocation problem. So I'd love to hear from Jean, Chris, and Gosa here on whether you think there's a need to fundamentally reevaluate what we look for in the startups that we back, or do you think that generally if we solve the sourcing problem, the problem gets solved in and of itself? Maybe start with Chris.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I think we had this sort of ideation process back in 2017, 18 around included.vc, right? Which is fundamentally that the industry is made up of middle-aged white men, and that wasn't going to change very, very quickly. And so we wanted to go out and find underrepresented communities who wanted a pathway into venture capital, and then we went and raised. I think we raised about 350, 400,000 a year that we put into the program, and the first cohort was in 2019. And so what was interesting is the first time we flew them all in together for a weekend workshop in Berlin. All the VCs, they were all in their row of chairs. All the fellows were in their row of chairs, and all the VCs were standing. And there were 16 white guys and 3 white VCs, female VCs. And the problem is so self-evident when we launched this program. And we're now on the second cohort, and it's a global program, and we've got 50. I think I've got the stats here. I've got them somewhere else actually, but it's 51%, 21% of the applications are Black, and I think it is 33% that become fellows, and it's 52% female. And so, we're trying to solve it in a structural way. I don't think you can change individual firms because you've got strong beliefs, purpose, and allies in those firms that are working hard to change the way that they're diversity in their own organization, but then to do it on a bigger scale. And we think about it in terms of structure, how we can change it structurally and how we can create scale into that. And this is the program that we use to that, and we use to do that. And so I think in cohort 1, 7 have so far got jobs in venture capital, and 2 actually out of the new cohort have already got jobs in venture capital. So we feel like, we're into version 2 and designing version 3. And then we're going to create, if you like, sub-programs that sit below that. For example, working with the Silicon Valley Product Group to find a way to promote black product managers into product managing in technology in venture capital firms, because one of the ways that deals get sourced today, and we source this way, is through machines and algorithms, right? And so the problem with machines and algorithms is that they keep looking for the same thing that's been successful before. So you build a data set, but then you've got to change the endpoints of what you're looking for, and you've got to change the scores of what you're looking for. Otherwise, it'll be like Amazon, that everyone has, bought this book, and everything will then get harder. So we're trying to tackle the problem from the human capital side, and we're trying to tackle the problem from the data side as well. And that's the way we kind of think about it. So.
Yeah. Igosa, do you think do you think there is a need to reevaluate what we look for in the startups we back? So you mentioned earlier on that 85 million round in a black female founder, that was the largest round, Series B round that has ever been reported for a black woman. So when you kind of take that back and dial that back, do you feel that there is a need to reevaluate how we look at the startups we back and the founders that we back?
Yeah, because from first principles, we have to make very different assumptions. So one of the challenges I think diverse founders struggle with is that they always have to beg for permission to be ambitious. That's just nonsense, right? And on the flip side, the VCs, I tell people all about it, and maybe it's just because I've been around the block and I've come this close, to essentially grossing over $50 billion in venture. And so now I realize that I can do it. But you have to do that in an unapologetic way. The same way I say, listen, I'm unapologetically black. I actually really like being black. And I also am unapologetically supportive of, diverse founders. And if you don't come into it with that sort of first principle view, right, then it becomes, it just becomes a sort of long run consequence that you can't control. The other challenge, I think, is that because of the way the industry is currently structured, it feels like being a black VC, you're expected to solve all of the problems related to diverse founders, right? And that's an issue, because what we want to be unapologetic about is who we fund, right? So if it's a group of an all-woman team, great. If it is one black woman, a Latino man, a white guy, great, right? But just being unapologetic about that and being able to be giving the capital so we don't have to sit, because we see this all the time. Some of the younger VCs I mentor, right, are so afraid of being that's the black founder guy, right? Those are all the deals they bring in, right? So they now go to the direct opposite side and be like, no, I can't do that because, these cats are going to now they're going to label me.
Right.
Right. And so, how you think about, and it does end up that we have to have these platforms, these VC platforms, that people can truly be genuine, right, and can be supportive of whatever type of teams that they like. And the flip side is that these teams can come into these meetings and meet these firms and not start to make weird adjustments because they're not quite sure whether or not they're being viewed with respect and with empathy and with understanding and recognizing their ambition. So it's a weird thing. Firms need to hire more diverse members of the firm. When you invest in companies, even if they're not necessarily diverse in leadership, you can encourage them to hire diverse operators, because then that's sort of how you start to beef up, the sort of investing pool. You'll notice that a lot of emerging managers, I keep saying this and people say, it's not true. I see a lot of first-time managers that are black and Latinx and whatever it is, and a lot of them are starting their firms because no one will hire them. And VC is an apprenticeship business. I don't care how lucky you get, but you have to go through cycles. It's just how it works. You have, your judgment, you just really have to keep honing your judgment. And there's so much you can learn just by symbiosis within a firm that people just you know what's going on, how it's not going on, you know how to read between the lines, and so on and so forth. So a lot of that is just, it comes back to that first point about these circles, right? And so if you're not encouraging more folks to get some exposure to judgment and get better judgment, it's a challenge. And if we need more companies. Now everybody says, oh, we need more unicorns, right? But the truth is, those unicorns are really hard to find. In the US, there might be 20 of them every year, give or take. There's so much failure in the US, but the narrative is so positive. But there's so much failure, right? And so that's the challenge is, but someone says, hey, a $50 million company, that's not that interesting. And then you're like, but that's funny because they only raised 400,000, right? And you then realize that, oh, that was a fantastic return. But everybody's like, they're all looking for one type of return, whereas it's really a continuum. So trying to find these companies, supporting these investors, trying to do what's necessary, teaching them how to fail, right? Not trying to carry their entire blackness everywhere they go because you think you're carrying the world on your shoulders. So when I come to work and I deal with this, I am carrying 3 tons of expectations. And you're not, right? And so you're trying to figure out how I can think about the future when I'm just thinking about the next corner, right? So, and that's true for the Black investors and the founders. Same thing with Latino, in a large degree, women. Right. So it is, I think what we can do is, to be honest, I'm a little greedy. I don't want any of you to go and find my secrets. It's cool, no problem. It's just cloud away, give me some capital, let me go find my secrets. That's the superpower we have. We find secrets. And then one day you'll be like, where did that company come from? And we're like, we told you, right? So it is a process, but we have to have allies. We have to have power lifters. You've got to be able to teach some of these founders, even if they're not diverse, that the diversity benefits their teams. It's a lot, but it's about voicing these things and then having others now sort of chime in and creating a good plan to execute on.
Well said, Igosa. I'd love to get to Rustin and Jamie. We've talked so much about access today, and kind of access in terms of networks and how that plays out. But it's more likely that most startups need, particularly in the early stages, need angels more than VCs. And access to angels can also be particularly difficult. And so would love to know from Rustin and Jamie, what do you think it could be done to make it easier to access angels in those early stages when it's primarily about the idea that you have and you need someone with conviction to back and take a punt on you?
Yeah, for me, and one of the things I'm relatively new to this venture space. I've been a private equity lawyer for the last 9 years, and being a Black man, I'm just getting enough money to become an angel and to be an accredited investor. And I think that's a big thing in our community as well. As the rules in the United States require $200,000 of income, $300,000 for a couple, just to become, and for 2 years to become an accredited investor. So I had to go through several years of college and law school and work at large law firms for 3 years before I was even at that level. And my older brother, who's a GC at a major utility in Detroit, because he lives in Detroit, he won't be at that level, right? It's only because I live on the East Coast that I have that outsized income. So that's the first part, is the number of Black accredited investors that can do angel type investments is fairly low in comparison to white counterparts. But I also think there's opportunities in the sense that there's a lot of Black institutions who, and hopefully I can bang this drum, need to come around these founders. We have organizations in the US like the NAACP or all the HBCUs, all the Divine Nine that helped get Kamala Harris and Joe Biden to the White House, right? how do we use those networks? And there's a lot of high net worth individuals in those networks. How do we conglomerate them into an angel network that's going to be more willing to invest and will understand the stories better than some middle-aged white guys in Silicon Valley or New York? And so if we can use those Black institutions that have been there for centuries, just as long as some of these white institutions, but change their focus away from, solving problems via litigation or whatever other ways that we've looked at these problems in the past, and say, let's solve these problems through investment and investing in our communities by using the collective. I think there's a lot of opportunity for that.
Jamie?
Well, I think we need more angel networks that are focused on Black and diverse founders. So people like, Cornerstone Partners in the UK. But I also think you need to put pressure on the generic angel networks to highlight the issue of underrepresentation to their members. So it's not just the Black angel networks, it's the generic angel networks. There was a time when I didn't know anything about the underrepresentation of women and minorities in venture capital. I had to become aware of it. I had to become educated about it. So, for example, the UK Business Angels Association put on a session called Investing in Black Founders Matters. And I'm sure it was a real education for members of the angel network who just hadn't focused on it in the past. But, to be honest, once you know that Black men get 0.2% of funding, venture funding in the UK, and Black women get 0.02% of funding, you sit up and notice. It sparks an interest. You have to want to go after that problem, but you also have to conclude that there's a big, huge opportunity here. So I do think you need to engage. So specialty Black angel networks, absolutely. But I also think you need to start calling on the generic angel networks. Pay attention. There's something seriously wrong here, and there's an opportunity for all of us.
Well said. So it goes to kind of brought a really interesting point a bit earlier, and when he was talking about diverse teams and how difficult it is for even Black VCs to find roles. Are funds capable of investing in diverse teams if they haven't diversified their own ranks? Would love to hear from Chris, Jean, and Paul on this.
Well, I mean, I definitely think there needs to be a push for diversity, within the VCs as well. I think, as we mentioned from the beginning, most people that set up VCs have either had a background as kind of exited operators, or they've come from the, financial institutions or background. And both of those areas, as we know, don't have a lot of underrepresented people in either of those areas. So most of the partners and senior people within VC happen to be white males. So in order for that to change, a generation of underrepresented founders need to exit businesses and they can start VCs. And I think a key to that is the research that's coming out and highlighting, as people have said, the problem. And what we've seen in the UK, at least in the last couple of years, we've seen the emergence of quite a few VCs and, for example, Ada Ventures as well, which is set up to invest in underrepresented founders. So kind of getting to know those people and co-investing with them helps the problem. But certainly when we're hiring, we need to broaden our diversity. And that's what we're doing.
I'm happy to take this. I'm not convinced that they can. I think that, we all know that well-led, diverse teams outperform all other teams. So therefore, the question is posed as, can non-diverse teams, be successful? Well, they can be successful to a point, right? And then I think, in every organization, we all know that you can really peel back and understand a sense of purpose about that organization. And you can do that with a founding team, and you can do that with a VC. And so if the purpose is there, you will see it and you'll feel it, and, it comes through in the stats. And I think, and then I think you've got to have a real commitment around the fact that does your organization represent the society or the opportunities that you're trying to, change the way that people trade, or change the way that people communicate, or change the way that people consume goods and services, right? And so therefore you would see that sense of purpose come through. So, you know, it would be easy to say, yes, of course they can. But actually it's more obvious to say that actually it's far less likely to happen if then they don't have, it's not able for you to observe their sense of purpose in these areas and these issues. And I think that's the way I tend to think about these things. And therefore I think it takes strategy, and it takes commitment, and it takes a sense of purpose to change individual companies and then an industry. I really do believe that, and I think I will continue to try and do my piece and work with great people like those on the call, and because I do think it's a hard challenge. It's a challenge that people find it too easy to be busy and to be distracted, and we understand that. I think someone said earlier, it's a problem that I didn't necessarily understand for some time until it really, really frustrated me significantly. It frustrated me much first in gender and then more broadly in all forms. So, I think you can see firms that have a sense of purpose in these issues, and it's pretty evident that they have a sense of purpose. And by the way, in terms of my own scorecard, we only have one founder that identifies as British Black. We have a very diverse team in terms of gender, but we only have one Black member of staff in 20. So we've got a lot to do. We have a lot to do ourselves. But I think people can look at companies like some of the firms on the phone, some of the partners have included VC, Notion, and they can see there's a sense of purpose there, that there is a real genuine commitment to change, and I challenge other parts of the industry to show their level of commitment as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything. I think just to add on, one of the frustrations about this industry is everything happens fast and slow. The startups that we invest in, they seem to grow so fast, yet as an industry, it's slow. It's slow to progress your career. It's slow to make money. It's slow to see the outcomes to determine if you're a good investor or a bad investor. And unfortunately, it's slow for recruiting. So I think at Northstone, we're in this strange situation, having come from the Nordics, where we've had gender parity for years on the investing team. It was never an effort, to be clear, but we can't say the same from a racial or ethnic perspective. And it's very much on our mind. We just made our first kind of partner that's not of kind of a white background, which is just happened organically, but also feels good because it feels like it's just starting to sort of spread on its own. But it's hard and it takes work. I think that's the thing. And so every time we're recruiting for a new position, we're making sure that our pipeline of candidates is more than representative to ensure that we're really reaching kind of every corner to get the best people.
Yeah. So I think in the past 2 weeks in the US, in the past couple of weeks, we've seen 2 Black unicorns be coronated, Calendly and Squire, which we've all heard so much about. What do you think it takes? What do you think we need to see happen in the UK in order to start seeing Black unicorns here in the UK and in Europe as well? What needs to happen for that to be possible? Dami, would love to hear from you first.
Sure. You're gonna let me do my plug. I launched our accelerator in the US, and we just finalized 14 investments there, and we're going to the UK next. So I think my answer is definitely mentoring and coaching is obviously great, but putting dollars in the hands of founders and giving them the opportunity to grow and scale, and giving them the resources and connections is exactly what needs to happen. So I think, the hope is that people understand that there is capital waiting at the end of this, right? So I think a lot of people have talked about how do we change the paradigm. Obviously, Black investors and diverse investors on the other side of the table is important. But I also think that when VCs come together like ourselves and say, hey, we're going to really be intentional about this in the UK and European ecosystem, there's that opportunity as well. My accelerator emerge is SoftBank Emerge is coming to the UK in Q2. And we're going to invest in 10 companies and take them through a 10-week program and hope VCs like yourself invest in them at the end of the showcase event. So you'll be hearing from me, everyone here, but things like that is, and coming together is probably what's going to really help get our unicorn out of the UK ecosystem.
Brilliant. Rustin, I think you wanted to weigh in on the previous question.
Yeah, I'll be very quick because I come from an industry, big law in the U.S. as it's called, is very white. And my summer class at my first law firm, which happened to be named after the lawyer who argued the other side of Brown versus Board of Education. There's 5 of us, 5 Black people in a class of over 100 in our summer class. 2 of us are now partners at law firms, which is great to see. And another one was a general counsel at a major corporation. But it wasn't enough. And to go to what Agosa said, I felt like the more unapologetic I was, the more things changed. When I came in and I did my work, and I was very clear, even applying as a summer associate, I said, if I do what I'm supposed to do, you cannot say there's a pipeline problem, and you cannot say that you're going to do the same way of recruiting from Howard University School of Law as you've done in the past. And now there's 12 people currently from Howard University School of Law at that law firm. And if you looked across New York and the rest of the world, there's probably never been that many at most of those firms ever. And so that's what Agosa is talking about is once we get in the door, we'll prove ourselves. And it's incumbent on the people who are at the top to recognize that once we prove our worth, you have to do your end of the bargain if you really say you're about diversity and inclusion to allow us to go back and reach back and pull more people like us.
Well said, Rustin. So LPs in the US, like Yale University, are beginning to make it clear that they will not give their money to funds that lack diverse teams and portfolios. Should LPs be exerting more pressure? Agosa, would love to hear from you, Jamie as well, Paul and Jean.
That's it's interesting you asked that question because I remember when Yale, issued the release or the news article about encouraging the fund managers to encourage their portfolios and the like, and an LP, very experienced LP, pinged me and said, "Did you see this?" And I said, "Yes." And the LP goes, "Has Yale ever invested in a diverse fund manager?" And I said, "I think that's a trick question because you already know the answer and you're asking if I know the answer. And I don't know the answer, so you tell me what the answer is." And the LP goes, "No." And this is part of the problem because everybody jumped on that. And Yale's a fantastic LP, right? High performing, especially alternative assets and the like. And they've never once funded a Black VC fund manager. Now, I don't have the data, but I would imagine this LP did. But so you now ask, how do you actually change that as an LP? And part of it is that existing dynamics. People will so how I think I saw some math, which was that 15% of funds return 85% of the industry returns, or something crazy. So you then ask, so why do these LPs keep doing the same thing over and over and over again? Maybe we need to go back and look at the 85% that are not doing any returning and say, maybe we might want to sort of change the mix here. Maybe there's something we're missing, right? But there's inertia. that's one of the problems we're going to always run into when people are like, well, there's no sense of urgency. There's a lot of inertia. When an LP chooses you as a fund manager, that is essentially a 3-fund commitment before they kind of say, okay, let's go reevaluate that, right? So, and every time you talk to an LP, they're like, well, if I bring you on, that means I have to kick somebody off. And, within a 6-8 year period, I don't really know what the performance is going to look like. If you're an early stage fund, it usually will take you 7 to 8 years before you start to see who's doing well, who's not, and the like. Mm-hmm. So you have this sort of it's essentially a death spiral because you just don't get anything coming out of it for a while, and and you sort of run through this cycle, and then eventually you just quit. And so what happens, I think, is for these LPs, they say, okay, we have an emerging manager program. And I apologize because I have to talk about this. The word diversity or the concept diversity or the term diversity is so handy that if you don't unravel it, they can come in and give you stats that say, listen, we're doing well. And then you realize that, no, it's just white women that are doing well. Right? And where's everybody else? Right? But they're like, oh, look, we've got all this lovely diverse stats. No. Right? Because once you do, as we've done in this panel, you unpack it, you realize, oh, this is actually non-performance. Like if you're actually grading this performance, you will grade it a D or an E. Right? So the LPs have to sit back and say, listen, we're going to do X. We're going to do X in Y months. And you have that deployment and you say, listen, I'm going to do the work required to form an opinion on what managers I want to back. And I'm going to do it by the end of the year. When we talked about, I think Paul talked about KPIs. We'll do it by the end of the year. We're going to deploy X dollars. Right? I think what Bank of America did, which was, listen, we're not going to sit here and shouting up and down Twitter, hand waving and doing the diversity theater or the BLM ballet, as I call it. No one's doing that. We're just like, listen, we're just going to go to work. Guys, we've announced, we've done 150 million. We've given 40 funds. We're going to do more. That's what needs to happen. A sense of urgency. And then you match that with the patience. Right? And then the final point I'll sort of talk about with LPs is that in many ways, they're handicapping a lot of the minority managers, because what you then find is they tend to give money to minority managers who are doing seed and early stage. It's almost like okay, fine, go play with this 5 million fund. Oh, that's great. That's cute. Take 20. Right? I've asked this question before in the US. How many GPs that are Black or Latinx can do Series B, Series C, and Series D deals? I've said it's under 50. And LP told me that he was confident it was under 10. I suspect it was reaching there, but it's a very small number. So then all the Black, and Latinx, VCs that are sort of being spun up now are doing seed and early stage, right? And then you're like, but I have this dependency on the Series B, Series C, and Series D investors, and they kind of like to know who they work with. So until you build a full stack of these types of investors, minorities, minority women, minority men, LGBTQ, until you build that full stack, which would probably take 10 years, right? We will keep having this conversation. And the LPs have to be dramatic in how they deploy money and how they are publicly supportive.
Well said. Jamie, would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, I don't want to contradict anything Agosa said about the neglect of diverse VCs, but I do think that the LPs have a responsibility and an opportunity to insist that the VCs that they use have better representation among their decision makers. I mean, I read somewhere that there are 20 Black decision makers in the UK. That's not acceptable. Doesn't make any sense. So in addition to what Agosa was referring to in terms of LP sponsorship of diverse firms, I think conventional firms need to pick up their game on their own staff, their own decision makers, because it's unacceptable. And I think LPs, particularly institutional LPs, have an opportunity to influence GPs the way they've done on other topics. I mean, there's no question that an institutional investor can tell the asset managers that service them what their expectations are. And I just wish that there was more of that going on.
Just want to echo that, there's the ESG component of all of our LP commitments. And it's included things that are broadly good for the world, yet has been absent anything around social, racial equality and representation. And so I think that does need to change. It's not part of the template, at least as far as I've seen. And I think that, maybe it seems like a superficial change, but I think it's a place to start at least. And hopefully then becomes more embedded, at least for those firms that, for whatever reason, haven't prioritized it yet.
Yeah, I think it's becoming clearer that KPIs need to be transparent. KPIs need to be set, and VC should be held accountable to those KPIs. What KPIs do you think would be appropriate? Dami, Jean, and Paul.
Well, the largest kind of VC LP in the UK is the British Business Bank, and because of COVID, they had this kind of convertible loan note where they could match VCs, and so I think we got them to match 10 investments that we did, and as part of that process, you had to put in the diversity from a gender perspective and also race perspective of the founders that you were backing. So I think overall they've had 1,000 investments that this British large LP has done directly co-investing, and that was part of their questioning in order to access the money. So I think that's the beginning of starting to look at that data, which is I think key to changing behavior, because it was only when you get these reports and you realize the scale of the problem that you start taking actions. So I do think the British Business Bank, which is the biggest LP in the UK, is kind of aware of this and doing a lot of good research and studies and reports that help shine the light on this.
Dami?
Yeah, I think, what it comes down to, and I think Agosa said it very well, is just like actual investments and deals and like clicking down. And I'm an Intel alum, and I know we had our amazing diversity initiative that went through, and we did that exercise in doing a click down, and a lot of it, I'd say 75% went to white women. So as an underrepresented Black, Hispanic person, you see that unless we actually are trying to hit metrics and be very specific, you're not going to get the goals. And we're all number-driven individuals, right? That's why we're on the finance VC side. So I think as long as we can be really transparent about that and be bold about that, we'll get the data and we'll get the deal flow and investments that we're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to add, I think there's some things that I think are table stakes / hygiene, like the Diversity VC has a great sort of certification process that we went through, and it does gets everyone to kind of go through the bias awareness and training. I think those are, again, I think they're hygiene, but to me it should be table stakes and everyone should do it. And then I think we just have to be, I think we should start sharing our numbers more clearly. And hopefully we can do that in a way where we're all willing to open ourselves up to being vulnerable and being criticized for good reason, but with the intention, that we improve. And I think that would be a great place to start and have the conversation. I mean, I remember I posted something on Twitter about how embarrassed I was about my own stats, and you wouldn't believe the amount of sort of hate mail I got from white men that were like, how can you say this? I was like, wow,
I remember that.
We need to talk about this because clearly there's a bunch of people I think that's okay, and so that's part of the process.
This has been an amazing panel. I'd like to invite Wendy. She's Chief of Staff at FounderTribes to come and close this out. But I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I wish it could go on for longer. Wendy, hi.
Thank you very much, Fredwa. What a fantastic panel. I want to thank everybody who joined us today, as well as all of the participants who tuned in. My name is Wendy Maldonado D'Amico. I am the Chief of Staff and Head of Marketing at FounderTribes, and I'm so pleased that everybody has joined us in this kickoff of our Black History Month events. I wanted to take a moment and just give you a heads up on upcoming events that you can expect. Next, on February 11th at 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. Please tune in for how to raise $1 million or more while Black or Brown. We will be speaking to Black and Brown founders who have raised over $1 million, and one person has even raised over $170 million. That is going to be a fantastic panel, and that will be, once again, February 11th, 1 p.m. EST, 6 p.m. GMT. You can come and find out how they did it. I also wanted to just make sure that everybody here knew about the upcoming event with Stacey Abrams, Nobel Peace Prize nominee and friend of Gary Stewart from Yale Law School. That event will be on February 25th at 3 p.m. EST, 8 p.m. GMT. Please go to our website, FounderTribes.com, and click on the events tab. If you just scroll down to the bottom, you'll be able to see how to register for the Stacey Abrams event with our special code so that you can go for free. And finally, I just wanted to invite everybody who's tuning in to join us on Clubhouse immediately after this event to continue the conversation for another hour. You can just look us up on Clubhouse if you have an iPhone or iPad Beyond Virtue Signaling, FounderTribes, and we will be there waiting for you. So please come over and join us there. Thanks again to everybody who spoke today. Such a really fabulous conversation. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of your day and that you join us on Clubhouse and for our upcoming events. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.